Ice is too slick to taxi on. You can't maintain control. The only difference is sunshine, right? No snow, no ice. Snow and ice, snow and ice. Fuel, a stream of fuel was going up and over the stove that I had already lit. Got about 6 inches of moat around the tent, and with this side flattened, what was a large tent is becoming smaller and smaller. We are in the backwater of the nation, yet here we are. We're on the front lines for a climate that's changing right now. But it's always just the desperate, just like, let's just get out of here, because I've been stuck here for a week in a blizzard, out of food, and it is a spectacular sight. I mean, you feel like you just stepped back into the Stone Age. You know, his point was, if we're going to study ecology over the long term, he's recognizing that ecology changes over time. This was a no-budget project, and to me, that's one of the funner parts about working out here. The things we go through for science. Well, it's Wednesday morning. It was windy overnight, but the tent's still here. Can't complain. I didn't hear any metal crunching noises, so I think the plane is still there too. It's time to get up, I guess, and face the day. I don't know how I'm going to keep that steam drill lit. Hutch. We'll figure something out. Tent is already on its pedestal, which is a good thing because there's basically a river running underneath it or around it now because the tent's a little bit higher. But there's a stream channel forming from the weather station that I'm connected to the kind of trying to come underneath me here, but now it's going around me. I think things are drying out a little bit. All right. Time to make the donuts. I'm out taking a walk. It's just before dawn. See the mountains lit up behind me, but not quite where I am. Now that it's the work is mostly done, my thoughts turn a little bit more to leaving, which means finding a place to take off. It's not as there's a little rock slide over there. Find a place to take off that's smoother than other places. Take off almost anywhere, but nicer is better, all things equal. Ice is super slick. I have to wear these creepers, otherwise I'd have no traction at all. I couldn't walk 3 steps. You can kind of see how shiny it is. Super slick. What happens is, during the day, the sun beats down on it and softens it up, makes it brittle on top. That upper inch or two gets real crunchy. Then you can walk without the creepers. At night, though, especially on a clear night, you know, the ice, everything, it's always radiating, losing energy, right? It's just the way nature is, mass is. If it's above absolute zero, it's losing energy. Well, it's losing energy now, but it's gaining more from the sun. So that's why it melts. But at night, without the sun on it, all you have is loss. So all this surface water, all these puddles of water, little streams, they start to freeze. And that newly refrozen ice is super slick. So, like, I had this problem a couple years ago. You know, ice is too slick to taxi on. You can't maintain control. If you're just taking off, it'd be one thing maybe, just keep it face downhill. But when it's slick like this, Can't walk on it, can't taxi on it. Things just start sliding around. I'm walking over to the other snow machine. I'm gonna bring it down to the plane camp to use it to tie the plane down with in case the wind gets any stronger. And that way I can use one of the snow machines to go drill my other hole. Alaskan planes right there. Some old parachutes right there. Gather above. I find parachutes are hard sometimes. They're kind of frozen half the ice. I end up ripping half of it apart. Those parachutes, I have photos of those parachutes from the late 60s, early 70s, airdropping stuff in. Yeah, it's a little bit lumpier up this high. Downhill. Ultimately, we've landed there before the snow machine was. That's a good spot too. I'm thinking about moving the whole works up here somewhere. Landing weather station. There's a lot more stuff right here than now. It's 22. Sure, that's high anyway. Other than the wind, it looks like it's going to be a nice day. Here's an example of, see that patch of snow right there? So it snowed a few days ago, and higher elevations, right, there's no snow, but that little part's facing north, a little less sunshine. Right, it's getting sun right now because the sun's actually coming a bit from the north this time of year, just a little bit. But it takes it longer to melt. That's why measuring mass balance out here is problematic with stakes, because snow doesn't melt as a linear function with elevation like it does in a lot of places. Here, aspect, that is which way the ground is facing relative to the sun, and the slope, how steep it is. I mean, like even like these glaciers on this is a north facing face of Mount Hubli. You see glaciers there. You see them on Snow Dome, but you don't see them here, right? This is south facing. Right, so solar aspect, same elevation, same latitude, same everything, same weather. The only difference is sunshine, right? No snow, no ice, snow and ice, snow and ice, snow. So, like Mount McCall here creates a huge shadow down the western part of the glacier. That's not in that shadow now. That's the shadow that covers over the plain in the evening so early. And so the snow line descends way down there, a couple hundred, the equilibrium line, the balance between accumulation and ablation, extends hundreds of meters. It's not in elevation. It's not a nice straight line. It's called, equilibrium line at altitude, really equilibrium elevation. It's not a single elevation. So measuring mass balance with stakes, it takes a lot of stakes to capture that. We've had that. I've tied up to 60 stakes here trying to capture some of that, but it's a lot. It's too much, really. So last winter I wrote a computer model to see if I could measure it better with the computer than I can in the field. And I don't know, I think it turned out to be the case. I don't know why anyone's written that model before and written other people have written pieces of it, but not put it all together. So my model takes sunshine, which now you can see the sun is just peeking over the ridge where we are. It's already hit lots of the glacier. So it takes sunshine, slope and aspect of the terrain. The sun can cast mountain shadows. This provides, as we've learned from that station that blew apart that we found yesterday, sunshine provides about 75% of the melt energy here. Another 20% or more is from air temperature, and the rest is minor processing, wind and sublimation and such. So just with modeling sunshine, modeling air temperature, provide the melt energy, and then like you can see how dark the ice is, all that dirt. So we put in albedo, that's how much sunshine gets absorbed by the ice, albedo of the snow, albedo of the fern. I track sort of a separate single buckets for each pixel. So I pixelated this whole area. So each pixel can be a meter, it could be 50 meters, chunking it up. So you just put it in the computer. Each pixel has a bucket of snow, a bucket of ice, or a bucket of fern, where you have uniform temperature, uniform density, uniform albedo. And the sun will, if there's snow, the sun will melt the snow first. That liquid will drip in. If the snow is still cold, that bucket is still cold, it'll refreeze at the bottom. It's an ice lens. Once the snow disappears, that ice lens gets exposed. That ice lens has its own albedo. And that'll melt, and it'll drip into the fern if there is any beneath it. And the same thing with the fern. Once the fern gets exposed with its own albedo, it melts. That will drip down. If the fern temperature is below zero, it'll refreeze there, etc. So I wrote that model, put it in reasonable values for albedos and temperatures, and I compared it to our sonic rangers. These are the units that continuously measure distance to the ground. So it's up on a stake, it looks down. So as the snow melts, the snow surface gets further away, and it records that. Then the ice starts to melt. Compared to that, and I compared to all the stake measurements we've had over 10 years, just the easy 10 years that I had at hand. Man, it tracked it better than I could have ever expected. I mean, almost to within the accuracy of the measurements themselves. And the advantage here, it's not just trying to mimic what I'm doing with the stakes, but so let's say I got 60 stakes. It's a huge area, right? Let's say it's, just for rough numbers, it's 6 square kilometers. So 6 square kilometers divided by 60 stakes, 0.6 square kilometers per stake. That's a huge area. How do you take those stake measurements and come up with a glacier-wide mass balance? You've got to extrapolate, interpolate between the stakes, extrapolate to the edges. This is just a numerical thing. There's no science behind it. Just math. And because everything is so, here's that snow patch. Everything is like this, right? I mean, there's one example of it. There's tons of examples similar to that. That math, that simple interpolation, extrapolation doesn't capture that. You're saying this point measurement I've made, this stake, represents the area around it. Does it? No, we know it doesn't. We do the best we can do. So the computer model, on the other hand, right? I'm just comparing my model, spatial map that I've made of mass balance to the stakes, just for validation. See if it works. Once I know it works, now I've got that mass balance from the computer at every pixel. I don't have to extrapolate. I've used science. I've used intelligence. I've used sunshine and air temperature to map out the mass balance melt of each pixel. So now I don't have to do any extrapolation. I just add up all those pixels. I've got a glacier-wide mass balance. Don't need the stakes at all. I mean, the stakes are there. I still need stakes just for a sanity check. But I'm not using the stakes themselves to extrapolate to get that glacier-wide mass balance, which is what we're after. And ideally what we're after is that mass balance for all the glaciers out here, right? Like I study McCall because it's all I can do, and I can barely do that. But there's 300 other glaciers nearby here, within 10 or 20, 30 kilometers. I can now apply that model to those glaciers, right? reasonable success. I've been mapping all these glaciers for 15 years now, so I don't have stake measurements, but I can validate, or at least assess the uncertainty of the model using those maps. The maps track how much volume is lost over time, and that should accumulate. The model should accumulate that to get the same number. Once we have that, that's expanding in space. Then we can expand in time. All right. Remember those red rocks I showed at the peak of the Little Ice Age glaciation? The glacier got up as high as those red rocks for 100 years before climate change to cause the glacier to shrink. We can model what that mass balance must have been to get the glacier to be that big. And we can model the future with various scenarios. Sunshine's more or less the same. Maybe it's cloudier. That's one thing you can't see because the sun's right here now. Let's see my head here. So there's ice on that side of the valley. No ice on that side of the valley because of sun. But there was ice. Can't see it in this thing, but these little valleys here on what is now the west-facing slopes, they had ice and ice veneers, and I think they had a major contribution to can't see it now either, to the glacier. Over here, I'll see if I can show it later. It's in the sun right now, but that side of the glacier, you can see the old lateral moraines where they were contributing. Anyway, it could be just cloudiness plays a major factor here in glacier growth. These glaciers have very low mass turnover. We're talking about gaining, a meter a year of ice over the whole glacier in a very big Little Ice Age accumulation year, losing half a meter to a meter of ice these days. Right, so the little things make a big difference here. So if it was cloudier, this thing about ice on the north-facing slopes, but not the south-facing slope, that would go away, right? Because you're eliminating sunshine, you're eliminating the aspect. So if the Little Ice Age was just cloudier, that could, same air temperature, that could potentially grow a much bigger glacier. That's something we can determine with modeling. We can test the sensitivity to these things. Sensitivity to air temperature, sensitivity to cloudiness, sensitivity to snow and rain. All things we can play around with now in an accurate way. And the overall picture in terms of mass balance, like I said before, I think these glaciers don't mean much at all to sea level rise. They play an enormous role in the ecology downstream. So what we want to figure out is when these glaciers are losing mass now, because they're losing mass from storage, the rivers are much bigger than they should be. The discharge is much bigger than the rainfall from this year because we're taking money out of the bank, essentially, right? Question is, at some point that's going to peak. Melt is driven by surface area, right? The sun only is melting what it can see. So as the glacier starts to retreat into its valley, surface area decreases. So the discharge, the meltwater, is going to decrease. So the rivers will get smaller. So from Little Ice Age to now, there's like a peak in river discharge to somewhere about now, and then there's going to be a decline. And the question is, well, what is about now? Is that today, or is that 10 years from now? Was it 10 years ago? That's the kind of thing we can determine through modeling. And I've written my mass balance model specifically to ride on top of a friend of mine's ice dynamics model. This big time model, this is really my first model. His model was meant for ice sheets like Greenland and Antarctica, but works just as well on a valley glacier. Just a few little tweaks you got to do to it. But his model tracks ice temperature with depth, sliding, deformation. So these processes of the glacier cooling down and that cold wave hitting the bottom, causing sliding to decrease, that's something we can model. But his model, because it was written mostly for Antarctica, where you don't have surface melt, you don't really care about temperature in that way, his surface part, his mass balance part of the model was very simplistic because that was appropriate for his questions. So that's why I wrote my mass balance model, because it tracks temperature. So it rides on top of his model, provides the surface boundary conditions of mass change and temperature, so that that temperature can then propagate through the ice in his model. So now we're not just measuring mass balance of all these glaciers in the region, but we're measuring their dynamics too. So we can actually watch them get bigger and smaller in the computer. It's really cool. And play, fun scenario games with that. What's it take to change the size of this glacier by a kilometer? What kind of mass balance do you need? Where does the snow line need to be? And the beauty of all that is I've got all the right answers here. I've got all the inputs, all these weather stations. I mean, I only got a couple running now, but I've had, for the glory days of my time here, 10 or more weather stations going on at any given time. So I know all the inputs, and I've got all these stakes. I know the dynamics. I've got ice temperature measurements everywhere going on the bottom. I know what the ice is. We're not guessing at it. I've got all my airborne maps, so I know the effect, the output on glacier volume, glacier size. So I've got all the inputs and outputs and in-betweens to validate this model, so see how to assess the uncertainties of this model. And because the model was written for ice sheets, Greenland, Antarctica, at that scale, all that skill we added to the model based on McCall Glacier instantly becomes available to these major ice sheets, the study of these major ice sheets. So that's the long-term vision. I say long-term with air quotes. I've been hoping to do this for years and years and years and years, and it's always get sidetracked. But I got my part of the model written this winter. I need to spend this winter I need to do all the rigor, the calibrations, the certainty assessments. Sundown. Write the papers describing it, let other people use it, see what they find. But hopefully in the next year, we'll have it's already coupled, but to rigorously couple it and see what we can learn about all these glaciers here. I'm at the snow machine now. Back into the shade. See all this rock fall. Most of this is transported rock, but a little up higher, some of that stuff is actively spalling off that mountain, but there's a pretty big ditch between here and there, so I feel pretty comfortable. All right, head back down. And see if the tent's still there. Cooking in the tent is not without its challenges. Probably everyone has their own system for doing this. I mean, ideally, you probably want to cook outside, but on a day like today, it would be challenging at best. My system, given how windy it is right now, I'm taking a little extra care because in case the whole tent comes up, I don't want this to go cattywampus on me. But I isolate myself from the stove, so there's no sleeping pad or anything connecting me. So if I jostle, I'm not jostling the stove. So it's got its own little pad here. Right now, I'm just kind of holding on to it in case it goes off on its own. But I've weighted down the far end of the tent with the heaviest stuff I can have at hand, and I get everything ready so that I'm not like leaning over, turning around, my foot kicks out and knocks everything over. So today's breakfast, little oatmeal, some raisins, some dried blueberries. Probably have a Turner cookie for dessert. I still have some left. Just waiting for the water to boil a little bit. Get the toast. I was in Antarctica one time, and they make everyone go through what they call a happy camper school, just to make sure everyone has sort of the basic skills. These big Scott tents, pyramid tents with a circular door. So I was inside, starting the stoves up. It's like an overnight thing, And you think the Antarctic program, I don't know how many hundreds of millions they spend down there. They'd have some decent stoves. Stove like this, you pump it up, an MSR, you pump it up. This little gasket that, or a couple gaskets that keep the fuel where it's supposed to be. So I pumped it up. I noticed one of the gaskets was blown out, so I handed it out the door and asked for another one. In the meantime, I got a different stove going. Somebody handed a new stove in. I started pumping it up. And what they'd done, somebody else had handed me the same stove I just handed out, right? So, fuel, I'm inside the tent, it's a bigger tent than this. A stream of fuel was going up and over the stove that I had already lit. And fortunately, no catastrophes occurred, but it just goes to show you got to check what you're doing. And never underestimate the capacity for other humans to put your life at risk. In any case, I think this is done. Yeah. So this is going to be oatmeal flavored with pad thai and Three Sisters stew. So I just have the one bowl. I like those bowls. Kind of fold up origami style. Let's see, now the challenging part is to dump the water. We still got some flame there. Let's shut that off. A little too much water, that's all right. And rid of the excess water here. It sounds worse than it is outside. I mean, it is pretty bad, but it always sounds worse in a tent. Hey, look at that. Didn't spill a drop. These are supposed to be, you're supposed to cook these oats. They're steel cut. But a few minutes in boiling water gets them softened up enough to meet. Between the tent floor disappearing because of the pedestal, the tent shades the ice, so it keeps the ice from melting, whereas the ice around it's melting, so the middle of the tent's getting higher. So I'm losing got about 6 inches of moat around the tent, and with this side flattened, what was a large tent is becoming smaller and smaller. All right, time to make some space. That first and second half of the second day, first half of the second day, I was so dehydrated. Water everywhere. That second day, I didn't drink enough the first day. That was my bad. The second day, I forgot my water bottle. So I went all the way up to camp. By the time we got back, I was just like prune. But I definitely hydrated last night. I set my alarm at 7:50 2 years ago, I guess. I went on this it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. You get up at 4, meditate for a couple hours, have breakfast, have some free time, start again at 8. So I do the 4 to 6 meditation, then I just go back to bed. I grab a snack, go to bed, wake myself up at 7:50, get there time for 8 o'clock. I never shut it off. It reminds me of that. I asked for the best seat in this restaurant, but when you do, service here is horrible. Yeah, the wind's not coming straight from the south, it's coming a little bit from the upper cirque, so it's hitting the tent broadside a bit. Anyway. Alright, enough of that. I decided to spend a little time this morning catching up with some note-taking and double-checking that the measurements I made the past couple days weren't completely wrong, which happens. It's remarkable. And the mass balancing is due with a tape measure, but there are all kinds of ways to screw that up, apparently. I've found most of them, but not all of them, I don't think. In any case, so what I've been doing is I take my field notes. I start out with come in with a sheet that's got last year's data, last campaign's data on it. I put this year's on it, and then that way it helps me to make sure I'm not off by a meter, or if things are crazy or whatever, it'll come out right now so that I still have time to go remeasure, or while it's still fresh in my mind, if I made a mistake, I can catch it, make a note of it, say, okay, this I wrote it down this way, but I really meant was this way, while it's still fresh in my mind. So everything came out really consistent. I put those polls in every couple years, and so there's 2 or 3 polls, hopefully at every location, not always. That's partly for velocity. So we're, as the pole moves down glacier, it can move into a slower or faster moving part of the glacier, right? The glacier just speeds up as it goes downhill to a certain point, then slows down. So by putting in several poles, like as it goes down, you have another one, we can measure a point in space as the poles move past it, right? So I have these two, I have these 2 measurements, here and here, but what I'm really tracking is this one in the middle. It's not a pole, it's just a virtual point in space, so I'm not measuring a velocity gradient rather than a point on the glacier. But the other big advantage is for mass balance. 2 or 3 poles in any given spot helps to trap errors with tape measure, snow probe, or whatever it might be. Again, it's remarkable how easy it is to screw this up. So these clusters of poles lend some confidence that the measurements, mass balance measurements, are right. That is, how much pole is sticking out of the ground, how much snow is there. So all the poles reduced really well. All the pairs and triples of poles all give basically the same answer. That also gives you some sense of the uncertainty. So if I have 3 poles that are, they're put in different years, but they're pretty close to each other in terms of mass balance. If one poll shows that I got 60 centimeters of melt, another shows I got 65, another shows I got 80, those numbers are probably all real. It's just that's the uncertainty within a certain area, right? That there's just, the melt is not uniform with, it's very heterogeneous. So it gives some sense of like how much do we trust any one number. And this was also just to avoid going outside and trying to deal with the steam chill in the wind. Figure it was a good opportunity, but looks like the mass balance is all good. I've been processing the GPS at night. That new receiver, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, the pole data is good. It's the in-between data that's like going from one pole to another that I haven't been able to figure out, but I don't really need to. It's the pole data that's important. That all seems to work. So yeah, so successful so far. Just gonna photograph all this so I have a backup, and then next time I get the Starlink working, maybe I'll text it or email it to myself so that it's safe. And it's time to head out. Back to steam drilling again. It's interesting. Here I am, Bob, and it's kind of bouncing along the bottom there. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but I'm at 5 meters right now. Last night before I stopped, I drilled down to 7. I thought, oh, I'll just throw the thing back in there, go up to 7. I got 7 more to go. Well, I hit ice again at 1.5 meters. Right? So I've had to re-drill from 1.5 meters down to 5. What that means is most of the hole that I drilled last night refroze. I found it a bit odd, but then, of course, I didn't. Ice can only refreeze if there's, or this water can only refreeze if there's ice below the melting point around it, right? To refreeze this water, it has to lose heat to somewhere. And it can't lose heat to ice that's at 0 because otherwise you'd start melting, so it just wouldn't work. So that means at 1.5 meters depth of my feet here, the ice is below freezing to some degree. So the summer heat wave, it's gone deeper than that, but it hasn't gone deep enough to get it above 0, or get it to 0, I should say, right? So this is why we have to drill down to 14 meters, because right now we're still in that seasonally affected zone. Winter makes it cold, this part of the ice colder, summer makes it warmer, but at some depth, seasons only last so long, winter only lasts so long, summer only lasts so long. So their effects can only propagate so deep because it takes time for that energy to move through the ice. And that time translates into a distance, the maximum distance we can reach, and it's somewhere in the 14 to 16 meter range. So that's why we drill down to that depth, put a thermistor temperature, basically a thermometer, digital thermometer down there that records up here at the surface to get us below that seasonal depth, because right at that seasonal depth point, that's about the mean annual air temperature. That integrates the whole year's worth of temperature at that point. And it remains to be seen in the data. Subsets that does a better job than these air temperature sensors I'm standing next to right here, because they're, the air temperature right here above the glacier, it's affected by the glacier itself, right? It's always, the ice is never warmer than 0 C. So you've always got this kind of cool air surrounding the surface that gets picked up to a certain degree by the air temperature sensors. We put them up 2 meters, but of course then we get 1.5 meters or sometimes 2 meters of snow. So now those sensors are right at the snow level, right at the ice level. So those kind of things monkey with the mean annual temperature, or the temperature measures. I can average the whole year's worth of temperature, and I'll get a number that's, it's a good number. It's better than nothing. But to some degree, I think these ice temperature measurements are more accurate. And that's kind of what we're after, right? The Arctic. Try to get out of the wind here a little bit. The Arctic is warming like the rest of the planet, but the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the planet because it started out polar, right? At the equator, it's probably hot there to begin with. If you make it any hotter, that heat wants to leave. It wants to follow the gradient to where it's colder, which is here. Right, so we're warming 2, 3, 4 times faster than most parts of the planet. And that's a challenge for this place, the Arctic, because much of the Arctic is thermally sensitive, right? Unlike further south,
most of the ground here is either ice like a glacier or ice in the ground itself with permafrost, dirt interlaced with ice, massive ice, little ice. The sea ice, the Arctic Ocean is covered with ice. Warm this place up, all that ice starts to melt. It changes all kinds of things, all kinds of dynamics. Gotta drill these holes straight, otherwise stuff doesn't go down the hole. So we know the Arctic's warming faster, but we kind of barely know this, right? A lot of that comes from modeling, because there's so few air temperature measurements up here, right? The few that have been around, starting in the 50s, most of them are decommissioned. One or two left around. Most of them are quite recent. These happened here. We started making measurements here in 1957, but they're not continuous. They're not good for climate change, really. They say something, but the rest of the state's instrumented with these really super duper climate reference network stations, but not here. One or two here and there. We've got weather stations, but weather stations, if you really want to measure climate, you have to take great care. We're talking about measuring, tenths of a degree over, a year on average, that kind of thing. I said before how these shields that I have here, I've made mine better than the stock was, but they're still not perfect. They're not aspirated. They heat up. They should have a little bit of warming on their own just from the sunshine hit them. Why we're not measuring, why there's not a dozen weather stations all throughout the state of back nature, I have no idea, right? We are in the backwater of the nation, yet here we are, we're the front lines for the climate that's changing right now. You can see all this ice is disappearing. Why aren't there weather stations all over the place? Why am I out here doing this on my own? These hokey weather stations I can barely keep alive. Drilling holes in the ice here to measure ice temperature somewhere it's a reliable measure of air temperature. I don't know. I was really successful early on getting this project funded. I'm starting in 2003. Had 3 projects back to back, full funding for the glory days. But I haven't been able to get one funded since. I haven't really tried very hard either. But I tried recently. Is it worth it? I don't know. I mean, you think, say I'm a glaciologist, people say, oh, well, what a great time to be a glaciologist. All this change, all this funding. Funding hasn't changed for glaciology 20 or 30 years. If anything, it's declined. And here we are. Here I am trying to capture the demise of this glacier before it's gone, the dynamic demise. The glacier will stay around for another 50, 75 years before it's completely gone. But the dynamics, the interesting part, that's going fast. You gotta get out here and measure it before it goes away. Otherwise, we're just back to model textbooks, thought experiments. So yeah, we need more measurements of every kind out here. We use glaciers as indicators of climate change. They're great at that. They tell us things about the climate that we don't know any other way. We don't have an excuse anymore, right? We have all this high-tech, low-cost, high-tech weather station stuff that we can deploy everywhere. But where is it? Why isn't it happening? And certainly one reason it's not happening is, it's a really inconvenient job, right? Everything here just kind of sucks. Everything about this just basically sucks, and you just have to accept that and roll with it. I mean, not just the physical conditions, logistics, weather, all that. just the job itself. I mean, right now it's not even a job. I mean, it's technically a hobby for me. I've been getting paid for this for 10 years. But even when I was getting paid for it, I was paid myself, right? Nobody was paying me to study glacier. I had to bring in all my own money. I was soft money, 12 months soft money. All that money had to come from grants and universal funding for that. Who wants a job like that? You gotta be mentally deficient. If smart people get jobs where they make money easily, right? If a person as smart as glaciologists, what the hell are we doing out here? Maybe that's the answer. But it's got to get done, right? Just find yourself either in the right place or the wrong place, the right time or the wrong time, depending on how you look at it. It's like, I don't do it, who's going to do it? Maybe something like, I don't know. Here I am right now. We're almost at 6 meters. So almost back to where we were last night. As things go, I mean, you can't beat the view, right? Place to myself, get work done, be productive, making a contribution. That's kind of what it's all about, right? It's sit through it. It's more, it makes them try to say it, but there's more to life to make money. Any idiot can make money. They're not the smart ones, really. I don't know. I've seen a lot of idiots that are really rich. Anyone can do that job. Payoffs to it. I'm not knocking it. I'm not being judgmental. But there's more to life than making money. You look at like what people say to do with their retirement money, invest in this and this. What are you going to do in your retirement? Right? Not this. Right? You sit around and do what? I have to keep doing this until I can. Until there's nothing left in here. Get pretty close. What can you do? Keep on keeping on. It's a couple hours later now. Got a lot colder. It's overcast for a while. The wind's been really strong. It's taken a lot longer than I thought. Steam drill's been a pain to keep lit. The fire keeps blowing out, so I've had to kind of rig a windscreen for it. Get myself a little bit more of a windscreen too. But we're almost at the moment of truth. Got another 20-30 centimeters to go, and then we're at 14 meters. In the meantime, I hooked up the thermistor string to the data logger to make sure it worked. Worst thing could happen is I throw it down there and find out it was broken somehow. So I made it a couple of years ago, but just haven't had a chance to install it. But it's working, and we're about to find out what the ice temperature at depth is. It'll take it, well, it'll only take overnight for it to freeze back, but it'll take another, I don't know, day or two or three for the temperature to stabilize. You know, I'm melting a hole here, so I'm warming the ice around it. But there's such a huge reservoir of coldness down there, essentially, that it'll freeze back pretty quick and get to the normal temperature for that depth. So maybe before we leave, we'll be able to find that out. But I ain't sticking around for it. Next chance I get to get out of here, I'm leaving. But that day is not today, that's for sure. It doesn't seem like it's going to be tomorrow either. What do we got here? 13. Still got a little bit. It's slow going this deep. The ice is cold. Takes a lot of pressure. I've had to fill the tank up a couple times. Glad I haven't run out of propane yet. I got one more hole to drill. Propane, stuff like that. I always think, oh, I'll be able to shuttle in some new propane tanks, send the old ones out. But it's always just a desperate, just like, let's just get out of here, because I've been stuck here for a week in a blizzard, out of food, and yeah, we definitely need some additional air support. People that actually know what they're doing. Come in and out and not have to babysit a plane this whole time. Yeah, leaving a plane out here is not ideal. The first plane I bought was to support this project. So few people, there's so few air taxis at all to begin with that service the Arctic Alaska. And even fewer of them want to land in a place like this. You know, it's 7,000 feet on a glacier. The infrastructure here, the aviation infrastructure is so thin. So trying to get rides in and out is always problematic, especially in summer. So we bought a plane and ourselves and had mixed success. And I eventually learned to fly so I could just do it all myself. That was when we had money, you know. By the time I learned to fly when the money ran out, I couldn't afford to hire anyone. I mean, I can't really afford to do this either, but it's kind of like the difference between renting and owning a house, you know. It's like, I wouldn't say it's any cheaper to do this, but do it myself, but at least it's going into a resource that's under my control and I can do what I want with. And it's there. If I run out of money, I have it for 1 year, I still have it the next year. But it's a pain. I mean, I'm a decent pilot, but I'm not like pilot. There's people much more skilled than I am. Should really be doing this work. But, you know, when it comes down to it, a landing's just a landing. Taking off's a little bit spicier, as Kit would say, especially with a tailwind. But, you know, it's everything else. It's getting here, crossing 2 mountain ranges, 4 different weather systems, fuel. I mean, the nearest fuel to here is 100 miles away on the north side. On the south side, it's Fairbanks. Or almost Fairbanks, you know, 300 miles away. I don't have enough fuel. I can't stuff enough fuel in that plane and take off legally. Get to here and come back. I got to get fuel somewhere. Otherwise, I don't have enough. You know, it's a 3.5 hour flight to get in here. I've got a 6 hour range, maybe, and with no headwinds. So yeah, there are all kinds of challenges here aviation-wise. I'm running out of steam. I am definitely running out of steam. But, shit. right. Well, I think I'm at we're done. I'm at 13.9, which is, I forgot what purpose they say. The hose since we get the water. Here's the tip. Now comes the moment of truth. This here, this is the thermistor string hooked in. It's a little bit bound up over there, but that's the full length. So I've got it played out and untangled. So I've got this lead weight at the end that helps sink it. And the idea is drop it in the hole. Don't get it caught anywhere. There we go. It's got little pieces of red tape you might see going down. Marks each meter. All right, so far so good. Yep, it's all the way down. That weight helps me bob it. Yeah. Yeah, 13.8, close enough. As long as we know what it is, that's the important part. That's a relief. Imagine trying to do that with a 200 meter cable, not a 14 meter, but 200 meters. That's what we did up there. 150 up there, 130 down there. 2008, we drilled holes all the way to the bottom so we can measure temperature down the entire thickness of the glacier at those three locations. Part of that whole story about how the glacier is getting colder, wanted to not just guess at it, but measure it. The upper circuit, we extracted an ice core, so we kept the ice. The rest of the time we just tossed the ice to the side. That ice core, it's neat stuff, man. People would say you can't do it on a valley glacier, but you never know until you try. We got back about 200 years, just about when we expected it. We found volcanic ash layers. We could date it absolutely different. Each volcano, the ash blows in and has a different chemical signature. Count the layers in between. And like things we saw were, gotta let this not get too deep. I don't think it's gonna freeze. 1972 is Clean Air Act, right? That's when we switched to unleaded gas, from leaded gasoline to unleaded. And in this ice core, this wasn't me, I extracted it with a lot of help, of course, but somebody else analyzed it. It had this melting system where you take a little stick of it, you melt it, and it siphons it off to all these different mass spectrometers and measures like 40 different things simultaneously, all kinds of pollutants, basically. Lead, cadmium, and also like black carbon, forest fire, soot, that kind of stuff. Anyways, 1972, you see lead, and then lead tapers off in tanks. That's not because people driving snow machines around here, right? This is in the lower 48 all around the world, or I guess lower 48 really, because it was a U.S. act. The car emissions, the burning of leaded gasoline, settled on the upper cirque, on the snow of the upper cirque, prior to 1972, and then became as that fern, as that sponge smushed into ice and got buried by more and more snow and then more and more ice. We could see the pollution from people's automobiles up here and measure it, and see in 1972 it go down. Same thing happened, well, we haven't seen the reverse yet, which hasn't because it hasn't happened yet, but starting in the late 90s in the core, you see a lot more coal burning byproducts. Very distinctive coal signature. There's not more coal plants here in Alaska. The way the winds blow, all that coal burning byproduct, that's wafting over from China, all the industrialization coming from there. Landing here in the middle of nowhere in this Arctic glacier, Upper Cirque, where we were standing yesterday, the day before, mapping, measuring mass balance, and measuring glacier motion, and watching the fern area disappear and the glacier get cold because of it. You just never know till you look. And to have that happen here in what's otherwise this pristine environment, after all, it's not all that pristine, because what happens elsewhere is affecting here. And when it comes down to it, all this climate change, all the warming that's causing this glacier to melt, that's not due to some local effect, right? That's not because somebody's driving around on a snow machine here or somewhere else. That's happening. The rest of the world is causing this glacier to melt away. The rest of the world is causing this glacier to get cold and its dynamics to change. So we like to think of it as pristine, but it's totally affected by what's going on around it. That being said, as places go, you can't get much more pristine than this. I mean, global dynamics are what they are. It's a remarkable story, the preservation of this huge area, most pristine, largest intact ecosystem in the US, especially when you combine it with similar but smaller reserves to the west and also in Canada. It's remarkable what we have here and what we're sitting on. But that's a story for a different time. I got to get this secured, eat some lunch, and then go do this again down glacier. Well, taking the better part of an hour after a quick lunch to mobilize to head down glacier, drill the second thermistor string. Got sled, snow machine sled, and steam drill sled ready to go. Data logger, download stuff, laptop, batteries, cables, everything I can think of. Probably forgot something, but propane, yeah. We'll see if I have enough propane. Water we'll find while down there, but I do have water bottles to transport. And traveling with a sled on ice is, I guess spicy is the right word. The danger is, especially with a heavy sled, the sled can get going faster than the snow machine, come in front of you, and then whip the whole thing around, and then stop if you're lucky. So I have these chain brakes, basically a loop of chain you throw under the sled to stop the sled, pushes against it. Makes it so dragging that so we're not going very far. I'll try and find a shallow route, but alrighty, here we go. Headed to, I stopped here because there's this bone pile here. It's been here since as long as I can remember. There used to be a lot more bones. Careful, I think there were two of them, as I recall. They've washed away over time. Still make out pieces and parts. I've been camping down at the terminus on the ground and seen herds of hundreds of caribou right past my tent. But if the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is known for anything, I think it's probably caribou. To people that don't know much about the place, but not dead caribou on glaciers, but caribou out here, when they draw together late May, early June, it is a spectacular sight. I mean, you feel like you just stepped back into the Stone Age. I don't know how many, but hundreds of thousands of these guys all around you, giving birth right in front of you. A little swarm moving around because there's a fox coming after them, or a bear. I'm not a fox, a wolf. And it's, for the people that subsisted on these caribou for thousands of years, 10,000 years or more, these caribou, this place is a sacred place. This is what allowed them to live, is these caribou. It remains to be seen their future with ecology that climate change is causing, but it is a precious resource, and this refuge, it's a whole nother story for another time, but one of the founding father of this refuge, his point was, if we're going to study ecology over the long term, he's recognizing that ecology changes over time, we got to set aside a big enough area so that ecology is unbounded, particularly caribou migrations, but also birds as well. But you got to leave enough space for them to do their thing, because if you don't, now you're not studying the natural changes to the ecology. You're studying, the fact that you put a fence around them. You're, keeping them entrained in some smaller area and limiting their migrations. And you got to keep those migration routes open and unimpeded and unaffected. Because once you do that, hell knows what's going to happen, right? We can't predict it. So the point was to have a place for that to happen. And it's largely driven around caribou because they roam over such a huge area. But it's the whole thing, really. And again, that's for another story. I got to get going. But, it could have been just as easily a place. We could say that about any aspect of science. And glacier science here preceded caribou science. 1957. This was built back in 1957, these guys had that wisdom. It's one of the unknown friends those guys were speaking to. So here we are. So we're at the site, the thermistor string site. Hadn't been here in summer in a few years, so this is had been previously the furthest glacier of these thermistor string sites. Needed to be out of the way of fern accumulation, which in the 70s was where the plain was, so they couldn't put one in there. Had to be in bare ice or replacing the ablation area. So you can see last 14-meter string. It's melted out. 10-meter exposed. 14 is still in the ice. It's probably, I haven't looked at it close, but it looks like it's only half a meter or a meter, so it hasn't melted out all the way yet. Station needs a little bit of leveling too. Yeah, so I'll clean that up and get the steam drill warmed up, and then we'll start on the next hole. See what the temperature is beneath our feet. I'm down by the second drill site still, maybe, I don't know, 2 hours since I've been here. Got the weather station cleaned up. Now there's more than one old thermistor string there. So now it's just mine, plugged in, tested, working. It's the worst thing, dropping the one. Super windy too for a while. I had to bring up this kind of tarp, the steam drill to keep it lit. It's worked pretty well. The winds died down quite a bit. It was a steady 15 to 20, and then gusts of 35 to 40 while I was taking that weather station apart, like strong enough to set you back. But it's a really warm wind, so I mean, comparatively, it's not desperate. So I'm down now 7.5 meters. So I'm trying to get to 14, so a little bit more than halfway. Drilling's faster here. I think the ice is a little bit warmer.
Also, just started with the shortest piece of hose. Now I added some more hose just a minute ago. Yeah, keeping it off the ice to keep it warm so the stuff doesn't get some bottom. Anyway, going well. Sitting here looking at this face. Be able to see that's where those red rocks were. Stopped there yesterday or the day before. This whole face here. See all that light colored rock? That was all glacier. Certainly 50 years ago. I checked the photos, maybe even more recently. You can still see some ice peeking out here and there. But these little side valleys are a bit north facing, so they hold ice. Or the snow doesn't melt as quickly because of the sunshine. Glaciers form there. You can see where they touched McCall Glacier. These were actually tributaries at one point. You can see where the moraines from those steeper valleys hit the moraine of this glacier. Connected. Sort of like, you see that that went all the way down to the horizon. Yeah, things are changing. Still super pretty no matter ice or rock. But changes what scientists changes what helps us understand how things work. If everything stayed the same all the time, it'd be hard to figure out what the mechanisms were. Change helps us figure out those dynamics. It's kind of like, if you were really good at something just naturally, you might not be able to describe what to do. You might not be able to excel to a higher level because you're just so good at it in a sense. But if you're making mistakes all the time, you can learn from your mistakes. You can learn what actually makes things work well. Science or athletics or whatever it may be. So glacier change, climate change, these things help us figure out how the dynamics work. Pick it up a little bit again. Science is about, field science anyway. Sitting around watching ice melt. Nope, it's on edge. Never really find it boring though. It's just time to think. Look at things. Would I be sitting here looking at that for 2 hours if I wasn't drilling a hole? Yeah, these steam drills are the best. They're so well thought out. It's clearly something made as a labor of love, right? Just to be able to perfect something so that it's the best it can be. It's the right mix of lightweight, strong. All the little doodads are thought out. It's all little toolkit that fits inside there. Water bottle that fits there. And it works, most of them. Yeah, if only everything was like that, right? Well, about 7:30. Got the whole drill all the way to 14 meters. The moisture string installed. Wow. Winds died down enough. The wind shifted a little bit. It's brought mosquitoes up from the tundra. Wind's coming, just a slight breeze now from down glacier. Can't escape those guys. But it feels really good. Get this station going again and get these thermistor strings installed. It's such a simple thing, you know. A couple $100 in thermistors and 4-pack of lithium AA's. It could be the most valuable data from this glacier. I mean, there's no instrumental climate record, air temperature record in the Brooks Range at all, other than what we have here, right? Over 50 years, so 1965 years in some sense, but say the early 70s for this type of data. There's nothing, right? It's a huge area. So Arctic, high elevation. I mean, this is 7,000 feet in this range. This is it right here. You're looking at it. That hole in the ground. Where is it? Right there. The other thing I really like about it, if you take a look at the station itself, it's built out of old survey poles. Many of which we found here, many of which I put this in 20 years ago, I figured out. So August 2004. Made out of survey poles, hose clamps. Just grabbed a bunch of rocks around, kind of tied it off a little bit. It's held up 20 years. There's all kinds of ways to build stuff, right? And with an unlimited budget, you can build beautiful things. Even with a limited budget, you can build beautiful. And this is a no budget project. And to me, that's one of the funner parts about working out here, and the stuff I get to do is coming up with essentially no budget solutions. The kind of engineering. And this thing lasted 20 years. It's still going. It needs a little TLC. I'm going to come back tomorrow actually and deal with a few things. But recycling, it's the ultimate repurposing of materials. And the kind of data we get out of it, I mean, for the value per buck spent collecting it, it's astronomical. I think that's that's a big part of what field science is about for me, is that just sort of getting to use my ingenuity, right? I mean, like, here's what I got. I mean, I can do all the planning I want. I can bring whatever I can think of in, but in the end, it's like, here's the box of stuff that I have to work with, and this is what I want to accomplish. How do I get from that box to this thing or that thing? I really enjoy that part of it. And, I've built full-on weather stations that are beautiful, because when I had money for them, not necessarily here. And that's fun to do too, but I think this is more fun. It's a bit more of putting your skills to the test, right? If you start out with an unlimited budget, you can spec things out, order things, and make it beautiful. But what can you do when, with the parts you have on hand or the tiniest budget you have? It's the most you can make out of it. I think that challenges me more, so I enjoy it more. And in the end, it's all I can do because I don't have a budget for this. But at this point, my personal mass balance budget is in the negative. I need some food and a bit of sleep. Come out here first thing in the morning, just fix this up, and start cleaning up camp and see what the weather is. Maybe leave tomorrow, maybe not. But it's for tomorrow to figure out. It's quite pleasant standing here too. Spend another summer out here. done all the things I've been wanting to do, clean up a lot of these piles of things that I create as I find them. Some of it's mine, some of it's from previous expeditions, but get all those piles consolidated. If I'm here the whole summer, I can potentially fly things out. I'm not just worried about catching one weather window. I have like a whole month's worth in and out a bunch of times. Bigger plane, more people, who knows? Who knows? It's about 8:30 now. Back in camp, obviously. I got up here, I decided to just kind of GI the place, make sure everything was tied down so I wouldn't have to get up in the middle of the night. I went over and checked on the plane, and the screws in the tail anchor had melted out, but it was still tied off to the snow machine. But the snow machine was on top of the anchor, so I undid the snow machine anchor. I just tied the back of the plane to the snow machine and tried to get to the screws to put them in. And as soon as I untied the plane from the snow machine, it started rolling. Fortunately, it caught on the anchors that were holding the gear down in the front. But man, I was thinking about that plane got loose on this ice and tracked straight. I guarantee it would start flying. Going down that hill, a few thousand feet, you could be going 40, 50 miles an hour. The thing would take off. Explain that one to the insurance company. Yeah. Fortunately, it's all tied off now. Turner gave me the weather. It looks like I'm going to be here tomorrow, so I think I'm going to use the steam drill and create some more solid anchors there. The last couple days if I need to. Same thing with I need to reset this tent. I can't sit up straight in it anymore because the center is so high because it's been shielded from the melt compared to the sides, which has been melting. The tent poles are now 6 inches below this height, so the whole tent has come down. The things we go through for science. I was thinking about that today too. Like, why am I here? Why is anyone doing this kind of work? Not just glaciers, but field work, Arctic field science. It all sucks. So the short answer is, I don't know. But I know the reason's constantly evolving. But I'm a bit too tired to get into it. But the shorter answers are why we're not doing it, why I'm not doing it. Most of us, all of us. It's certainly not for the fortune and glory of it all. I think there's, I don't know, I'm rounding up a lot here, and I think there's maybe only 10 people in the country that can say they're full-time glaciologists. 10, right? I mean, like field glaciologists studying glaciers like this somewhere, not just here, but anywhere on the planet. Like, that's the kind of numbers. But there's, I don't know, 1,000 people that would self-identify as glaciologists in the country. They're all working part-time. Nobody's able to pull it off full-time. USGS is the only federal agency that's monitoring glaciers full-time. They're monitoring three glaciers out of the 100,000 we have here. And that's not knocking the people doing that work. That's the funding level. The program manager told me last year that at I forget how he phrased me, but my advanced age as a senior, whatever, I shouldn't expect to get more than 2 months out of a successful proposal to NSF. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The hell am I supposed to do with 2 weeks? Took 2 weeks just to, prepare for this trip. I gotta set aside 3 weeks, just a window of planning nothing else, just to find 4 days to come out here. 2 weeks. I mean, what does that leave graduate students? I mean, what person in their right mind would want to become a glaciologist when instead of more opportunities for funding, more stability as you get older. You have less, right? He said, oh, we fund new faculty 2 months, maybe 3, but senior faculty 2 weeks. The fuck? I mean, what the fuck? You expect people to become, intelligent people to become glaciologists? It's not for the money, because the money ain't there. All of us end up spending our own money on this anyway. And I'm more on the end member extreme case. All of this is funded out of my pocket, but it's not for the money. It's certainly not for the glory. I mean, I started doing this 30 some years ago. And our story as scientists, and I say our, the collective our, the royal our, hasn't changed in those 30 years. The directionality, the central message, it's always been the same about what's happening and why. We've got a lot better at understanding those causes, right? We've got a lot better at our predictions. And now we can say with 95% certainty that this is going to happen in 10 years versus 75% certainty. But the fraction of people that believe in climate change and the fraction that don't, those percentages haven't changed. So what am I doing here? I mean, do I really think like my one data point, like that thermistor string I just put in, is that really going to change the hearts and minds and tip the percentages some other way? There's millions of data points like that, and thousands of people like me over 30 years. Nothing's changed, right? We like to think, we tell ourselves that, we say that in our proposals, but nothing's really changed. People don't, I mean, scientists, when we played the game by the rules, we believe it, right? We know how to verify people's data. We play by a certain set of rules, and as long as you're playing the game right, we all come basically to the same, more or less the same conclusion. We get in the weeds with a lot of the details, whatever. But most people don't play by those rules. They play by some other rules. So, we're preaching to the choir. We're preaching to ourselves here. We're not changing hearts and minds. So that's not the reason. If anyone's doing this for that reason, they're the ones that are delusional. I mean, gourmet dehi out of the bag. In a tent with a moat. Trying to keep my $100,000 airplane from taking off on its own. Yeah, there's got to be some reason I'm here. But I'm going to have to sleep on it. Because I'm done with the science and I am exhausted. I'm looking forward to a good night's sleep. God, do you hear how quiet it is? Mouth is shaking. Oh my God. We'll see how it goes.